Grand Rising, my loves. Happy Sunday to the family, Ashe. I hope all is well with the tribe. All is well with I. Still kicking it. Saw fit, the Lord saw fit to give us another day. This is the Essene Code. The Essene Code.
It's followed by the brotherhood at the Dead Sea, and Lake Mariotis from the original Aramaic and French translation, compared, translated, and edited by Edmund Bordeaux Szekely. A complete translation from the Aramaic of the manuscript discovered by Count Volney during his travels in Egypt and Syria, 1783 to 1785, giving a record of the discourse between the famous Roman historian Josephus Flavius as pupil and Banus, the Essene, as master during Josephus' 3-year sojourn with Banus in the desert of the Dead Sea for his initiation into the Essene teaching and tradition. Nature. We are surrounded by her, embraced by her, impossible to release ourselves from her and impossible to enter more deeply into her. She creates ever new forms. What exists has never existed before. What has existed returns not again. Everything is new and yet always old. We live in her midst, and yet we are strangers to her. She speaks constantly with us, but betrays not her secret to us. We are continually at work upon her, yet have no power over her. She is forever building, forever demolishing, and her workshop is not to be found. She is the sole artist. Goethe. Today nature is inanimate and Pan is dead. Men's souls are scattered beyond the hope of unity, and the sword of formal creeds sharply separates them everywhere. We regard ourselves proudly as separate from nature. To live with the universe made life the performance of a majestic ceremony. To live against it was to creep aside into a cul-de-sac. Yet even now I seem aware of changes stealing over the face of the world once more. Like another vast green beginning, I feel that man's consciousness is slowly spreading outwards once again. Some voice from the long ago is divinely trumpeting across our little globe. Algernon Blackwood. Chapter 1. The Natural and Cosmic Law. Josephus. What is the law of nature? Banus. It is the constant and regular order of events, by which the Creator governs the universe. An order which his wisdom presents to the senses and reason of men, as an equal and common rule for their actions, to guide them without distinction of race or religion towards perfection and happiness. Josephus, give a clear definition of the word law. Banus, an order or prohibition to act, with the express clause of a penalty attached to the infraction, or of a recompense attached to the observance of that order. Josephus, do such orders exist in nature? Banus, yes. Josephus, what do the words nature and cosmos signify? Banus, the word nature bears 3 different significations. 1. It signifies the universe, the cosmos, the material world. In the first sense, we say the beauties of nature, the riches of nature, that is to say, the objects in the heavens and on the earth exposed to our sight. 2. It signifies the power that animates, that moves the universe. Consider it as a distinct being, such as the soul is to the body. In the second sense, we say, the intention of nature, the secrets of the universe. 3. It signifies the partial operation of that power on each being, or on each category of beings. And in this third sense, we say, the nature of man is an enigma. Every being acts according to its nature. Wherefore, as the actions of each being, or of each species of beings, are subject to constant and general rules, which cannot be infringed without interrupting and troubling the general or particular order, those rules of action and of motion are called natural laws or cosmic laws. Josephus, give me an example of those laws. Banus, It is a law of nature that the sun illuminates successfully the surface of the terrestrial globe, that its presence causes both light and heat, that heat acting upon water produces vapors, that those vapors rising in clouds into the regions of the air dissolve into rain or snow and renew incessantly the waters of fountains and rivers. It is a law of nature that water flows downward, that it endeavors to find its level, that it is heavier than air, that all bodies tend towards the earth, that flames ascend towards the heaven, that it disorganizes vegetables and animals, that air is essential to the life, etc. Wherefore, as all these and similar facts are immutable, constant, and regular, so many real orders result from them for man to conform himself to, with the express clause of punishment attending the infraction of them, or of welfare attending their observance. So that if man pretends to see clear in darkness, if he goes in contradiction to the course of the seasons, or the action of the elements, if he pretends to remain under water without being drowned, to touch fire without burning himself, to deprive himself of air without being suffocated, to swallow poison without destroying himself, he receives from each of these infractions of the law of nature a corporeal punishment proportionate to his fault. But if, on the contrary, he observes and practices each of these laws according to the regular and exact relations they have to him, he preserves his existence and renders it as happy as can be. And as the only and common end of all these laws, considered relatively to mankind, is to preserve and render them happy, it has been agreed upon to reduce the idea to one simple expression and to call them collectively the natural and cosmic laws. Chapter 2. The 10 Essentials of the Natural and Cosmic Laws. Josephus. What are the essentials of the natural and cosmic laws? Banus. There can be assigned 10 principal ones. Josephus. What is the first? Banus. To be inherent to the existence of things, and consequently primitive and anterior to every other law, so that all those which man has received are only imitations of it, and their perfection is ascertained by the resemblance they bear to this primordial model. Joseph. What is the second? Banus. To be derived immediately from the Creator and presented by him to each man, whereas all other laws are presented to us by men who may be either deceived or deceivers. Josephus. Which is the third? Banus. To be common to all times and to all countries, that is to say, one and universal. Josephus. Is no other law universal? Banus. No, for no other is agreeable or applicable to all the people of the earth. They are all local and accidental, originated from circumstance of places and of persons, so that if such a man had not existed, or such an event happened, such a law would never have been enacted. Josephus. Which is the fourth essential? Banus. To be uniform and invariable. Josephus. Is no other law uniform and invariable? Banus. No, for what is good and virtue according to one is evil and vice according to another, and what one and the same law approves of at one time, it often condemns at another. Josephus. What is the fifth essential? Banus. To be evident and palpable, because it consists entirely of facts incessantly present to the senses and to demonstration. Josephus. Are not other laws evident? Banus. No, for they are founded on past and doubtful facts, on equivocal and suspicious testimonies, and on proofs inaccessible to the senses. Josephus. What is the sixth essential? Banus. To be reasonable, because its precepts and entire doctrine are conformable to reason and to the human understanding. Josephus. Is no other law reasonable? Banus. No, for all are in contradiction to reason and the understanding of Banus. To be just, because in that law the penalties are proportionate to the infractions. Josephus. Are not other laws just? Banus. No, for they often exceed bounds, either in rewarding deserts or in punishing delinquencies. Is the eighth essential, Banis, to be pacific and tolerant, because in the law of nature, all men being brothers and equal in rights, it recommends to them only peace and toleration, even for heirs. Josephus, are not other laws pacific? Banis, no, for all preach dissension, discord, and war, and divide mankind by exclusive pretensions of truth and domination. Josephus, which is the ninth essential? Banis, to be equally beneficent to all men, in teaching them the true meaning of becoming better and happier. Josephus, are not other laws beneficent likewise? Banis, no, for none of them teach the real means of attaining happiness. All are confined to pernicious or few. Happy and ignorant as they were 8,000 years ago. Josephus, what is better? Because it comprises in use either that constitutes essentially as we're divested, they would primarily appear of any utility. Josephus, recapitulate all 10 essentials. Banis, we have said that the law of nature is 1. Primordial, 2. Immediate, 3. Universal, 4. Invariable, 5. Evident, 6. Reasonable, 7. Just, 8. Pacific, 9. Beneficent, and 10. Alone sufficient. And such is the power of all these attributes of perfection and truth, that when in their disputes the theologians can agree upon no article of belief, they recur to the natural and cosmic laws, the neglect of which, say they, forced God to send from time to time prophets to proclaim new laws, as if God enacted laws for particular circumstances as men do, especially when the first subsist in such force, that we may assert it have been at all times and in all countries the rule of conscience for every man of sense or understanding. Josephus, if as you say it emanates immediately from the Creator, does it teach his existence? Banis, yes, most positively, for to any man whatever, who observes with reflection the astonishing spectacle of the universe, the more he meditates on the properties and attributes of each being, on the admirable order and harmony of their motions, the more it is demonstrated that there exists a supreme intelligence, a universal and identic mover, designated by the appellation of God. And so true it is that the natural and cosmic laws suffice to elevate him to the knowledge of the Creator, that all which men have pretended to know by supernatural means has constantly turned out ridiculous and absurd, and that they have been obliged to recur to the immutable conception of natural and cosmic reasons. Josephus, then it is not true that the followers of the natural and cosmic laws are atheists. Banis, no, it is not true. On the contrary, they entertain stronger and nobler ideas of the divinity than most other men, for they do not sully him with the foul ingredients of all the weaknesses and passion entailed on chaotic humanity. Josephus, what worship do they pay to him? Banis, a worship wholly of action, the practice and observance of all the rules which the supreme wisdom has imposed on the life of each being, eternal and unalterable rules, by which it maintains the order and harmony of the universe, and which, in their relation to man, constitutes the natural and cosmic laws. Josephus, were the natural and cosmic laws known before this period? Banis, it has been at all times spoken of. Most legislators pretend to adopt to its basis of their laws, but they only quote some of its precepts and have only vague ideas of its totality. Josephus, why? Banis, because though simple in its basis, it forms in its development and consequence a complicated whole which requires an extensive knowledge of facts, joined to all the sagacity of reasoning. Josephus. Does not instinct alone teach the natural and cosmic laws? Bennis. No, for by instinct is meant nothing more than that blind sentiment by which we actuated indiscriminately towards everything that flatters the senses. Josephus. Why then is it said that the natural and cosmic laws are engraved in the hearts of all men? Bennis. It is said for two reasons. First, because it has been remarked that there are acts and sentiments common to all men, and this proceeds from their common organization. Secondly, because the first philosophers believed that men were born with ideas already formed, which is now demonstrated to be erroneous. Josephus. Philosophers then are fallible? Bennis. Yes, sometimes. Joseph. Why so? Bennis. First, because they are men. Secondly, because they are ignorant, call all those who reason right or wrong philosophers. Thirdly, because those who reason on many subjects, and who are the first to reason on them, are liable to be deceived. Josephus. If the natural and cosmic laws be not written, must they not become arbitrary and ideal? Bennis. No, because they consist entirely in facts, the demonstration of which can be incessantly renewed to the senses, and constitute a science as accurate and precise as geometry and mathematics. And it is because the natural and cosmic laws form an exact science that men, born ignorant and living inattentive and heedless, have had hitherto only a superficial knowledge of them. Chapter 3. The principles of the natural and cosmic laws relating to man. Josephus. Explain the principles of the natural and cosmic laws with relation to man. Bennis. They are simple. All of them are comprised in one fundamental and single precept. Josephus. What is that precept? Bennis. It is self-preservation. Josephus. Is not happiness also a precept of the law of nature? Bennis. Yes, but as happiness is an accidental state, resulting only from the development of man's faculties and his social system, it is not the immediate and direct object of nature. It is in some measure a superstructure annexed to the necessary and fundamental object of preservation. Josephus. How does nature order man to preserve himself? Bennis. By two powerful and involuntary sensations, which it is attached as two guides, two guardian angels to all his actions. The one a sensation of pain, by which it admonishes him of and deters him from everything that tends to destroy him. The other a sensation of pleasure, by which it attracts and carries him towards everything that tends to his preservation and the development of his existence. Joseph. Pleasure, then, is not evil, a sin, as fanatics pretend. Bennis. No, only inasmuch as it tends to destroy life and health, which by the avowal of these same fanatics we derive from God himself. Josephus. Is pleasure the principal object of our existence, as some philosophers have asserted? Bennis. No, not more than pain. Pleasure is an incitement to live, as pain is a repulsion from death. Joseph. How do you prove this assertion? Bennis. By two palpable facts. One, that pleasure, when taken immoderately, leads to destruction. For instance, a man who abuses the pleasure of eating or drinking attacks his health and injures his life. The other, that pain sometimes leads to self-preservation. For instance, a man who permits a mortified member to be cut off suffers pain in order not to perish totally. Josephus. But does that not even prove that our senses can deceive us respecting the end of our preservation? Bennis. They can momentarily. Josephus. How do our sensations deceive us? Bennis. In two ways, by ignorance and by passion. Josephus. When do they deceive us by ignorance? Bennis. When we act without knowing the action and effect of objects on our senses. For example, when a man touches nettles without knowing their stinging quality, or when he swallows opium without knowing its sulphurous effects. Joseph. When do they deceive us by passion? Bennis. When conscious of the pernicious action of objects, we abandon ourselves. nevertheless, to the impetuosity of our desires and appetites. For example, when a man who knows that wine intoxicates does nevertheless drink it in excess. Josephus, what is the result? Banus, that the ignorance in which we are born and the unbridled appetites to which we abandon ourselves are contrary to our preservation, that therefore the instructions of our minds and the moderation of our passions are two obligations, two laws which spring directly from the first law of preservation. Josephus, being born ignorant, is not ignorance a natural law? Banus, no more than to remain in a naked and feeble state of infancy. Far from being a natural law, ignorance is an obstacle to the practice of all its laws. It is the real primordial sin. Josephus, why then have there been thinkers who have looked upon it as a virtue and perfection? Banus, because from a strange or perverted disposition, they confounded the abuse of knowledge with knowledge itself, as if because men abuse the power of speech, their tongue should be cut out, as if perfection and virtue consisted in the nullity and not in the proper development of our faculties. Josephus, instruction then is indispensable to man's existence? Banus, yes, so indispensable that without it he is in every instant assailed and wounded by all that surrounds him. For if he does not know the effects of fire, he burns himself. Those of water, he drowns himself. Those of poison, he poisons himself. If in the savage state he does not know the wiles of animals and the art of seizing game, he perishes through hunger. If in the social state he does not know the course of the seasons, he can neither cultivate the ground nor procure nourishment, and so on, of all his actions, respecting all his wants. Josephus, but can man individually acquire this knowledge necessary to his existence and to the development of his faculties? Banus, no, not without the assistance of his fellow men and by living in society. Josephus, but is not society to man a state against nature? Banus, no, it is on the contrary a necessity, a law that nature imposed on him by the very act of his organization. For first, nature has so constituted man that he cannot see his species of another sex without feeling emotions and an attraction, which induce him to live in a family, which is already a state of society. Secondly, by endowing him with sensibility, she organized him so that the sensations of others reflect within him, and excite reciprocal sentiments of pleasure and of grief, which are attractions and indissoluble ties of society. Thirdly and finally, the state of society founded on the wants of man is only a further means of fulfilling the law of preservation, and to pretend that this state is out of nature, because it is more perfect, is the same as to say that a bitter and wild fruit of the forest is no longer the production of nature, when rendered sweet and delicious by cultivation in our gardens. Josephus, why then have some philosophers called the savage state the state of perfection? Banus, because as I have told you, the vulgar have often given the name of philosopher to whimsical geniuses, who from moroseness, from wounded vanity, or from a disgust to the vice of society, have conceived chimerical ideas of the savage state, in contradiction with their own system of a perfect man. Josephus, what is the true meaning of the word philosopher? Banus, the word philosopher signifies a lover of wisdom, and as wisdom consists in the practice of the natural and cosmic laws, the true philosopher is he who knows these laws, and conforms the whole tenor of his conduct to them. Josephus, what is man in the savage state? Banus, a brutal, ignorant animal, a wicked and ferocious beast. Josephus, is he happy in that state? Banus, no, for he only feels momentary sensations, which are habitually a violent wants which he cannot satisfy, since he is ignorant by nature and weak by being isolated from his race. Josephus, is he free? Banus, no, he is the most abject slave that exists, for his life depends on everything that surrounds him. He is not free to eat when hungry, to rest when tired, to warm himself when cold. He is every instant in danger of perishing, wherefore nature offers but fortuitous examples of such beings, and we see that all the efforts of the human species since its origin sorely tend to emerge from that violent state by the pressing necessity of self-preservation. Josephus, but does not this necessity of preservation engender an individual's egotism, that is to say, self-love? And is not egotism contrary to the social state? Banus, no, for if by egotism you mean a propensity to hurt our neighbor, it is no longer self-love, but the hatred of others. Self-love, taken in its true sense, not only is not contrary to society, but is its firmest support, by the necessity we lie under of not injuring others, lest in return they should injure us. Thus man's preservation and the unfolding of his faculties, directed towards this end, teach the true natural law in the production of the human being, and it is from this essential principle that are referred, and in its scale are weighed all ideas of good and evil, of vice and virtue, of just and unjust, of truth or error, of lawful or forbidden, of which is found in the morality of individual or of social man. Chapter 4. The natural basis of morality, of good, of evil, of sin, of crime, of vice, and of virtue. Josephus, what is good according to the natural and cosmic laws? Banus, it is everything that tends to preserve and perfect man. Josephus, what is evil? Banus, that which tends to man's destruction or deterioration. Josephus, what is meant by physical good and evil, and by moral good and evil? Banus, by the word physical is understood whatever acts immediately on the body. Health is a physical good, and sickness a physical evil. By moral is meant what acts by consequent more or less remote. Calumny is a moral evil. A fair reputation is a moral good, because both one and the other occasion towards us, on the part of other men, dispositions and habitudes which are useful or hurtful to our preservation, and which attack or favor our means of existence. Josephus, everything that tends to preserve or to produce is therefore a good? Banus, yes, and it is for that reason that certain legislators have classed among the work agreeable to the divinity the cultivation of a field, the fecundity of a woman, and the wisdom of a teacher. Josephus, what tends to cause death is therefore an evil? Banus, yes, and it is for that reason some legislators have extended the idea of evil and of sin even to the killing of animals. Josephus, the murdering of a man is therefore a crime according to the natural and cosmic laws. Banus, yes, and the greatest that can be committed, for every other evil can be repaired, but murder alone is irreparable. Josephus, what is a sin according to the natural and cosmic laws? Banus, whatever tends to disturb the order established by nature for the preservation and perfection of man and of society. Josephus, can intention be a merit or a crime? Banus, no, for it is only an idea void of reality, but it is a commencement of sin and evil by the impulse it gives to action. Josephus, what is virtue according to the natural and cosmic laws? Banus, it is the practice of actions useful to the individual and to society. Josephus, what is meant by the word individual? Banus, it means a man considered separately from every other. Josephus, what is vice according to the natural and cosmic laws? Banus, it is the practice of action prejudicial to the individual and to society. Josephus, have not virtue and vice an object purely spiritual and abstracted from the senses? Banus, no, it is always to a physical end that the finally relate, and that end is always to destroy or preserve the body. Josephus, have vice and virtue degrees of strength and intensity? Banus, yes, according to the importance of the faculties, which they attack or which they favor, and according to a number of persons in whom those facilities are favored or injured. Josephus, give me some examples. Banus, the action of saving a man's life is more virtuous than that of saving his property. The action of saving the lives of 10 men than that of saving only the life of one. And an action useful to be the whole human race is more virtuous than an action that is only useful to one single nation. Josephus, How does the natural and cosmic law prescribe the practice of good and virtue and forbid that of evil and vice? Banus. By the advantages resulting from the practice of good and virtue for the preservation of our body, and by the losses which result to our existence from the practice of evil and vice. Josephus. Its precepts are then in action? Banus. Yes, they are action itself, considered in its present effect and its future consequence. Josephus. How do you divide the virtues? Banus. We divide them in three classes. First, individual virtues, as relative to man alone. Secondly, domestic virtues as relative to a family. And thirdly, social virtues as relative to society. The natural foundation of individual virtues. Josephus. Which are the individual virtues according to the natural and cosmic laws? Banus. There are 5 principal ones, to wit. First, science, which comprises prudence and wisdom. Secondly, temperance, comprising sobriety and moderation. Thirdly, courage or strength of body and mind. Fourthly, activity, that is to say, love of labor and employment of time. Fifthly and finally, cleanliness or purity of body, as well as in dress or in habitation. Josephus. How does the natural and cosmic law prescribe science? Banus. Because the man acquainted with the cause and effects of things attends in a careful and sure manner to his preservation and to the development of his faculties. Science is to him the eye and the light, which enables him to discern clearly and accurately all the objects with which he is conversant, and hence, by an enlightened man is meant a learned and well-informed man. With science and instruction, a man never wants for resources and means of subsistence. And upon this principle, a philosopher, who had been shipwrecked, said to his companion that they were inconsolable for the loss of their wealth. For my part, I carry all my wealth within me. Josephus. Which is the vice contrary to science? Banus. It is ignorance. Josephus. How does the natural and cosmic law forbid ignorance? Banus. From the grievous detriments resulting from it of our existence. For the ignorant man, who knows neither cause nor effect, commits every instant error most pernicious to himself and to others. He resembles a blind man groping his way at random, and who at every step jostles or is jostled by everyone he meets. Josephus. What difference is there between an ignorant and a silly man? Banus. The same difference is between him who frankly avows his blindness and the blind man who pretends to sight. Silliness is the reality of ignorance, to which is superadded the vanity of knowledge. Josephus. Are ignorance and silliness common? Banus. Yes, very common. They are the usual and general distempers of mankind. More than thousands of years ago, the wisest of men said, the number of fools is infinite, and the world has not changed. Josephus. What is the reason of it? Banus. Because much labor and time are necessary to acquire instruction, and because man, both ignorant and indolent, fear it more convenient to remain blind and pretend to see clear. Josephus. What difference is there between a learned and a wise man? Banus. The learned knows, and the wise man practices. Josephus. What is prudence? Banus. It is the anticipated perception, the foresight of the effects and consequences of every action, by means of which foresight man avoids the danger which threaten him, while he seizes on and creates opportunities favorable to him. He thereby provides for his present and future safety in a certain and secure manner, whereas the imprudent man, who calculates neither his steps, nor his conduct, nor efforts, nor resistance, falls every instant into difficulty and dangers, which sooner or later impair his faculties and destroy his existence. Chapter 5. The natural foundation of temperance. Josephus. What is temperance according to the natural and cosmic law? Banus. It is a regular use of our faculties, which makes us never exceed in our sensation the end of nature to preserve us. It is the moderation of the passions. Josephus. Which is the vice contrary to temperance? Banus. The disorder of the passions, the avidity of all kinds of enjoyments, in a word, cupidity. Josephus. Which are the principal branches of temperance? Banus. Sobriety and continence. Josephus, how does the law of nature prescribe sobriety? Banus, by its powerful influences over our health. The sober man digests with comfort. He is not overpowered by the weight of ailments. His ideas are clear and easy. He fulfills all his functions properly. He conducts his business with intelligence. His old age is exempt from infirmity. He does not spend his money in remedies, and he enjoys in mirth and gladness the wealth which chance and his own prudence have procured him. Thus, from one virtue alone, generous nature derives innumerable recompense. Josephus, how does it prohibit gluttony? Banus, by the numerous evils that are attached to it. The glutton, oppressed with ailments, digests with anxiety, his head troubled by the fumes of indigestion, is incapable of conceiving clear and distinct ideas. He abandons himself with violence to the disorderly impulse of the lust and anger, which impair his health. His body becomes bloated, heavy, and unfit for labor. He endures painful and expensive distemper. He seldom lives to be old, and his age is replete with infirmities and sorrows. Josephus, should abstinence and fasting be regarded as virtuous action? Banus, yes, when one has eaten too much. For then fasting and abstinence are simple and efficacious remedies. But when the body is in want of ailment, to refuse it any, and let it suffer from hunger or thirst, is delirium and a real sin against the natural and cosmic law. Josephus, how is drunkenness considered according to the natural and cosmic law? Banus, as a most vile and pernicious vice. The drunkard, deprived of the sense and reason given us by the Creator, profanes the donations of the divinity. He debases himself to the condition of brutes. Unable even to guide a step, he staggers and falls as if he were epileptic. He hurts and even risks killing himself. His debility in this state exposes him to the ridicule and contempt of every person that sees him. He makes in his drunkenness prejudicial and ruinous bargains, and injures his fortune. He makes use of opprobrious language, which creates him enemies and repentance. He fills his house with trouble and sorrow, and ends up by a premature death or by a miserable old age. Josephus, does the law of nature interdict absolutely the use of wine? Banus, no, it only forbids the abuse. But as the transition from the use to the abuse is easy and prompt among the generality of men, perhaps the legislators, who are prescribed the use of wine, have rendered a service to humanity. Josephus, does the law of nature forbid the use of certain kinds of foods on particular days during certain seasons? Banus, no, it absolutely forbids only whatever is injurious to health. Its precepts in this respect vary according to persons, and even constitute a very delicate and important science, for the quality, the quantity, and the combination of ailments have the greatest influence, not only over the momentary affections of the world, but even over its habitual disposition. A man is not the same when fasting as after a meal, even if he were sober. A glass of spirituous liquor or a drink of hydromel gives degrees of vivacity, of mobility, of disposition to anger, sadness, or gaiety. Such a meat, because it lies heavy on the stomach, engenders moroseness and melancholy. Such a fruit, because it facilitates digestion, creates sprightliness and an inclination to oblige and to love. The use of vegetables, because they are light foods, cleanse the body and gives a disposition to repose, calmness, and ease. The use of meat, because it is full of nourishment, and of a spirituous liquor, because they stimulate the nerves, creates excitement, uneasiness, and audacity. Now, from the habitudes of ailment result habits of constitution and of the organs, which form afterwards different kind of temperament, each of which is distinguished by a peculiar characteristic. And it is for that reason that in hot countries especially, legislators have made laws respecting regime of food. The ancients were taught by long experience that the dietetic science constituted a considerable part of morality among the Egyptians, the ancient Persians, and even among the Greeks. At the Areopagus, important affairs were examined fasting, and it has been remarked that among those people where public affairs were discussed during the heat of meals and the fumes of digestion, deliberations were hasty and violent, and the result of them frequently unreasonable and productive of turbulence and confusion. The natural foundation of continence. Josephus, does the natural and cosmic law prescribe continence? Banus, yes, because a moderate use of the most lively of pleasures is not only useful, but indispensable to the support of strength and health. And because a simple calculation proves that, for some minutes of privation, you increase the number of your days, both in vigor of body and mind. Josephus, How does it forbid libertism? Banus. By the numerous evils which result from it to the physical and moral existence. He who carries it to an excess enervates and pines away. He can no longer attend to study or labor. He contracts idle and expensive habits which destroy his means of existence. His public consideration and his credit, his intrigues occasion continual embarrassment, cares, quarrels, and lawsuits, without mentioning the grievous, deep-rooted distemper, and the loss of his strength by an inward and slow poison, the stupid dullness of his mind by the exhaustion of the nervous system, and in fine, a premature and infirm old age. Josephus, does the law of nature look on that absolute chastity to recommend in religious institutions as a virtue? Banus, no, for that chastity is of no use either to the society that witnesses or to the individual who practices it. It is even prejudicial to both. First, it injures society by depriving it of population, which is one of its principal sources of wealth and power. And as bachelors confine all their views and affections to the term of their lives, they have in general an egotism unfavorable to the interest of society. In the second place, it injures the individuals who practice it, because it deprives them of a number of affections and relations, which are the springs of most domestic and social virtues. And besides, it often happens from circumstance of age, regime, or temperament, that absolute continence injures the constitution and causes severe disease, because it is contrary to the physical laws of which nature has founded the system of the reproduction of beings, and they who recommend so strongly chastity, even supposing them to be sincere, are in contradiction with their own doctrine, which consecrates the law of nature by the well-known commandment, increase and multiply. Josephus, why, according to the Mosaic law, is chastity considered a greater virtue in women than in men? Banus, because a want of chastity in women is attended with inconveniences much more serious and dangerous for them and for society. For without taking into account the pains and disease they have in common with men, they are further exposed to all the disadvantages and perils that precede, attend, and follow childbirth. When pregnant, contrary to law, they become an object of public scandal and contempt, and spend the remainder of their lives in bitterness and misery. Moreover, all the expense of maintaining and educating their fatherless children falls on them, which expense impoverishes them, and is in every way prejudicial to their physical and moral existence. In this situation, deprived of the freshness and health that constitutes their charm, carrying with them an extraneous and expensive burden, they are less prized by men, they find no solid establishment, they fall into poverty, misery, and wretchedness, and thus drag on in the sorrow of their unhappy existence. Josephus, does the natural and cosmic law extend so far as the scruples of desires and thoughts? Banus, yes, because in the physical laws of the human body, thoughts and desires inflame the senses, and soon provoke to action. Now, by another law of nature in the organization of our body, those actions become mechanical wants which recur at certain periods of days or weeks, so that at such time the want is renewed of such an action and such a secretion. If this action and this secretion be injurious to health, the habitude of them becomes destructive of life itself. Thus, thoughts and desires have a true and natural importance. Josephus, should modesty be considered as a natural virtue? Banus, yes, because modesty, inasmuch as it is a shame of certain actions, maintains the soul and body in all those habits useful to good order and to self-preservation. Chapter 6. The natural foundation of courage and activity. Josephus, are courage and strength of body and mind virtues according to natural and cosmic law? Banus, yes, and most important virtues, for they are efficacious and indispensable means of attempting to our preservation and welfare. The courageous and strong man repulses oppression, defends his life, his liberty, and his property. By his labor he procures himself an abundant subsistence, which he enjoys in tranquility and peace of mind. If he falls into misfortune, from which his prudence could not protect him, he supports them with fortitude and resignation, and it is for these reasons that the ancient moralists have reckoned strength and courage among the four principal virtues. Josephus, should weakness and cowardice be considered as vices according to natural and cosmic law? Banus, yes, since it is certain that they produce innumerable calamities. The weak or cowardly man lives in perpetual cares and agonies. He undermines his health by the dread, oftentimes ill-founded, of attacks and dangers. And this dread, which is an evil, is not a remedy. It renders him, on the contrary, the slave of him who wishes to oppress him. And by the servitude and debasement of all his faculties, it degrades and diminishes his means of existence, so far as the being of his life depends on the will and caprice of another man. Josephus, but after what you have said on the influence of ailments, are not courage and force, as well as many other virtues, in a great measure, the effect of our physical constitution and temperament? Dennis, yes, it is true, in so far that these qualities are transmitted by generation of blood, which the elements of which they depend. The most reiterated and constant facts prove that in the breed of animals of every kind, we see certain physical and moral qualities attached to the individuals of those species, increase or decay according to the combination and mixtures that they make with other breeds. Josephus, but then, as our will is not sufficient to procure us these qualities, is it a crime to be destitute of them? Banish, no, it is not a crime, but a misfortune. It is what the ancients call an unlucky fatality, but even then we have it yet in our power to acquire them. For as soon as we know on what physical elements such or such a quality is founded, we can promote its growth and hasten its development by a skillful management of these elements. And in this consists the science of education, which, according as it is directed, meliorates or degrades individuals or the whole race to such a pitch as to totally